Okay.
Yeah, you can listen if you want.
Okay. Now, I always start my my teaching with this piece of Darkei Gemara. Darkei Gemara, as we said, Yitzhak Kampenton, around 50 years before the expulsion of Spain. That's 1450. He writes a wonderful, a very small book actually, on the basic fundamentals of how to learn. And this is something where I put the English in for those people who are having difficulties with English, but this is a foundation point.
Thank you for that, by the way. Toda Rabbah.
Okay, I realize that not everybody knows Hebrew, so I put that in. This is the foundation. If you know these few little lines, you already have tools to understand why people are talking about when they're talking. Okay. So here is what he says again. We'll just repeat it very quickly. Klal gadol be'iyun shetidigdek b'lashon heitev. The fundamental rule of intensive study is to be exacting with the language of the text. If you want to know what Hashem wants you to do, you have to read the text. Okay? It's obvious, but it's not so obvious. People think that they can imagine, they can dream, they could think, and a lot of people have a lot of ideas about what Hashem wants them to do. But he gave us a book called the Torah. And the way that we learn the Torah, the first rule is the Torah is written by the creator of the universe. So it has to be very precise. You wouldn't think that Einstein, when he wrote equals mc squared, really means E equals mc to the third power, or E equals PC squared. It must mean that those words are valuable. He's an intellectually bright person. He's trying to explain something very deep. And he uses a formula. It must be that every part of that formula is necessary, else he wouldn't have put it in. So the first rule is, when you approach the Torah or the Talmud, is always to realize that the text is being written in a very brief and precise way. That's called dikduk halashon, means you have to be very precise with the language. Now, he doesn't leave it at that. He gives us a short list of things to look at. And if you memorize this little list, the next time you look at a line in the Torah, you should ask yourself these questions. And lo and behold, you'll see that if you find these anomalies, these unusual things happening, then you will see that the commentaries are talking about it. That's what they're talking about, because they're looking at it. So what are they looking for? What are we looking at for? Lishtadel wrote in Yeshbo Yitur Lashon or Kafel Inyan. The first thing you have to see is, in the text you're reading, is there any language that's extra? If the text was written in 3 words and you think that it could have been written in 2 words, so that third word is extra. There's no reason for it to be there. So read the text yourself, engage yourself with the text and say, wait a minute, are all the words in this sentence needed? Or is there some extra words there that really don't have to be there? I could have said the same thing without that word. The second thing you should look for is what's called kaful inyan. Even if the words are unique and all necessary, but are the words telling you the same thing, the same information twice? Is there a repetition of concept there? Inyan means concept. So are the words extraneous? Are there any extraneous words? Or is this concept being repeated? They're saying the same. You're reading a Mishnah. Wait a minute, this is the same information we just learned two lines before. That can't be. So therefore, I have to think about it. Wow, what's going on here? I'm missing something. So that's the first thing.
I just want to ask a question actually to Josh. Josh is a lawyer. In the legal world, if you have something that's written twice in a document, would it be the same as this, that like there'd be a reason why, or sometimes is that just for emphasis? What would be the reason?
I would say that the legal world should take a lot of guidance from the rabbinic world and the Torah world. When we use terms that are intended to be the same term, but they're not the same term. It's usually by mistake. If it's different terms, it should be intentional, and that's what the rabbi is describing. A lot of the legal world comes out of, like the Parshat Mishpatim. We develop all of our laws of damages from, very, 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 very similar to what's in the Torah. But we don't have a system like this where when we have similar words or different words or extra words, we can consult the rabbi or try to figure out what Hashem wants. If people in the legal world intend to use the same words but use different words, we'll wind up in court, and the judge is going to try to figure out what everybody means.
Right.
Unfortunately.
That's helpful.
Okay. Now, and the important thing here is that Hashem wants us to understand what He wants us to do. Okay. It's a communication between the Kodesh Baruch Hu and ourselves. So he tries as much as he can to say only things which are necessary and only things which are sufficient. So we're going to, anytime that there's an extra word, we say, wait a minute, this is Hashem talking. We don't add extra words. We don't repeat ideas. So therefore, a flag pops up and we say, wait a minute, what's going on here? What am I missing? Okay, the second thing is ve'im yesh chiddush be'ininahu or maimrahu alav. The second thing is there has to be a new idea expressed, even if the sentence is said beautifully. There's no extra words at all. It's not repetitious, but everybody knows it. If I tell you the sky is blue, that's very nice, no extra words. But everybody knows that. They just look out the window and say the sky is blue. So there's no chiddush in that. So when it comes to the Torah, everything has to be teaching us a new idea, something new. Okay. Every statement and every concept has to be something new. If you see something that you would have known already, because you look out the window and see the sky is blue, or you saw it in a line previously, or some other a book in the Chumash, so you say to yourself, wait a minute, Hashem doesn't repeat ideas. This is not a new idea. We learned this 3 chapters ago. So you have to say, wait a minute. Hashem doesn't repeat the ideas. We're missing something. There has to be some new concept here that we're missing. Okay, that's number 2. The third thing that we have to look for is what's called shinui lashon, shinui din, or shinui inyan. A shinui means change. If we see that language changes, for instance, there's a Mishnah that starts off talking about a cod, a vessel, and then then the next law talks about a barrel. Okay, so when we see any inconsistency in language, we say, wait a minute. Why not just repeat the same word? Why did you change that word? There must be, again, a flag pops up and says, wow, what are you trying to tell me here by that change of word? Or if the law changes from one case to the next, you say, there's a change in law, something must have caused it. So what was it in that second case that caused the change of the law? Okay, because things don't change just because they change. I mean, everything has a reason why it changed. So when it comes to a change in law, we say, wait a minute, it must be that there was something new in this case, even though it looks like the case before that's changing the law. That's called shinui din. And the third one is called shinui inyan. When you have a transition from one topic to the next, you say to yourself, well, what is the transition point between, what's the connection between topic A and topic B? Okay, that's called shinui inyan. Why do we now go from topic A to topic B? Then what you have to do is darish choker and show
topic A to topic B would be like, why was it taught in the order that it was taught? Like, why does it go from A to B versus B to A? Like, you'd actually think, okay. Because I'll just say.
In other words, if you have a group of things, right? Let's say I have a group of people in the class. Why do I start with Mr. X, Y, and Z?
Right.
Why did I start Mr. Z to say, hey, why did I start where I started?
Right. So sometimes, like in the Gemara, for example, it'll be like, it could be something that's a different topic, but it's like we're bringing down the other places where this particular rabbi said something, or
Well, actually, now you brought up a good exception to the rule.
oh, that's not. Can I give another example? Just
no, why is it a good exception to the rule? Because sometimes if a rabbi says if there's a short group of cases or statements that a rabbi says, sometimes the Gemara will put them all together in one place.
Yeah. So
Okay,
I wasn't thinking of that as
that's
an
an
exception. I was thinking of that as that's, if we ask that question, then we'll need an answer. And the answer would be because we're going to teach all that rabbi's things so that people can remember it in one spot or something.
Oh, okay. Good for you. Yeah. Okay.
I'll give another example just of how I'm applying the rabbi's teachings. Is this morning I was learning the laws in Shabbos, and it says the Mishnah first teaches about what possessions you can take out of the house if there's a fire. And then it teaches ways that you can actually indirectly contain the fire. So my question was, why didn't it teach us how to contain the fire before it taught us about taking the possessions out? I haven't gotten a good answer yet, but I think it's a good question because.
No, it is a good question. Now you know that you have a good question.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a strength of learning this little sefer. Okay, because
right.
It gives you proper questions to ask. No one can say you're asking an improper question. They may say I don't have the answer to it right now, or maybe we'll look it up. But that's exactly the strength you get by learning this little sefer. You get to ask good questions. You know they're good questions because Riaz Compton told you it was a good question. So
I agree.
Okay, so all right, so. After you've done that, you have to darish choker and shoel heitev. That means explain and investigate and ask very, very well. Be very inquisitive and try to pull out of the language that's in front of you in such a way that every word and every portion is coming to teach you something new that you never knew before. Okay, so it's not only that things have to be new in its place, but it has to be new in all of the Talmud and all of the Chumash. The Mishnah is not going to teach you something that you would know by reading the Chumash. There's no need to do that. Okay, the Chumash is not going to repeat something that it already said before. Okay, if it does, you have to say, why is it doing that? Okay, so we presume that's very important. Everything has to be teaching something new in its place, and also it has to be new throughout the whole of Shas. Okay, now, after you do all that, you have to now recast your learning in such a way that you understand what. You have to take that bataskil, the shorish. You always have to ask yourself, what is the source of this law? Is it a rabbinic law? Is it a chumah? Is it a law from the Torah? If it is from the Torah, which pasuk it is from the Torah? Okay, you always have to get down to the essential law. You have to strip away any factors in the case that are unessential for causing that law. Okay, you have to get down to the essential etzem, the cause of the law. And then also you have to always know the limits of the law. How far does it go? That's what I was trying to do in the first few classes to show you about Rashi, was to show you about limits. It's very important. Most of the work we're going to be doing is defining limits of the law. Okay, you have to fill in, well, what's called square, what's called rosh, what's called inside. You either do the mitzvah or you don't do the mitzvah. It's very, very specific. So each mitzvah has its definition, its gvul, its border. And the setting of that border is very, very important, because if not, then you either ate matzah or you ate chametz on Pesach. What separates matzah from chametz? You have to know, you do the mitzvah, you didn't do the mitzvah, or you did the berachas for shalom. So that's the work that the Gemara, the Torah Shabbat Peh, is always involved, and it's always involved in defining the Gedarim, that means the definition of the law. Exactly what my Rebbe used to say, the language, when yeah and when not. what's in and what's out. When is it called a lulav and when is it called a palm tree or a date tree? Whatever. Is it a branch? Is it a fruit? What is it? So that's called limitations. That's what you have to do at the end. Okay. And the end, you always have to come out to this, what he calls the no say mishpat. You have to clear what is the case and what's the law. So in the end, case and law is your final goal. Okay. There may be a lot of words there, but you have to always consolidate those words down to case and law. Now we saw in the Chumash, when we did the work, that the Torah talks about case and law. Okay. Now I want to switch to the Mishnah, and I want to apply these principles. I'm going to ask you to apply these principles to the Mishnah and see if there's any change in language, if there's any change in law, if there's any repetition, if there's any extra words. Okay. That's called hands-on learning. Okay, so here we have the first Mishnah we're going to be involved in. We looked at Mishpatim a little. In Mishpatim, we saw that, make this a little smaller here. Okay, in Mishpatim, we saw there's these group of cases of injury of man to other men or man to other property, and then there's injury of property to man and to other property. When we analyze this case very superficially, I mean, not without the Torah Shabbat there. So we saw that the Torah talks about the case of a shore, that means an ox damaging another person, okay? And then it talked about a bore, a pit that a man dug, damaging a shore, a chamor, an animal. Then it spoke about the shore again, but this time instead of damaging a person, it damages another animal. And then it talks about the ganav, which is damage to property. Okay, a human being damaging property by stealing it. And then it switches to a animal who eats or tramples another man's property. And finally, it talks about fire, which burns down another man's field. Okay. So in this little category, we're going to be talking about what they talk about in legal terms. They tell me it's called torts. I mean, it's called, basically, this is laws of damage. Okay. At what point are you responsible for the damage caused? Not every damage that's caused is your fault. If someone, chas v'shalom, runs, leaves his briefcase in the middle of the highway and you hit the briefcase, you can't say, well, you owe me for hitting my briefcase. What's your briefcase doing there? Okay, so not every case where you damage someone's property may you be liable to pay. So we have to define these things again. We're all back to definition. We have to define what the Torah, and not in common law, we're going to do it according to the Torah. Kodesh Baruch Hu says to us, look, this is what I define as your responsibility to pay for it. Injury to person or to property. Good, fine. So the Mishnah now takes these pesukim of the shore, the bore, the mob, and the hever, okay, and it now tells us the following, okay? So I added, now I'll always add these little notes because it's hard to understand the Mishnah just by itself. But I'll try. In this case, I didn't do that many of them. Okay. So David, maybe you read the first statement here. What does it say here?
Okay, it says Arba Abos Nezikin.
Yeah, what does that mean?
There are 4 fathers or heads, like of damagers, plural.
Okay, good. So Arba means 4. No problem about that. But what's an Av? Literally, what is an Abba?
A father.
A father, right? So now we're using that term in a legal sense now, or in a Torah sense. And what does a father do? What's the difference between a father and a husband?
It teaches about the relationship. Like a father has descendants and a husband has a spouse.
Right. So a husband doesn't necessarily have descendants, right?
Side versus going down.
Exactly. So the father has a next generation. It produces another generation.
Mhm.
Okay. Of course, you need the mother, but the father is the progenitor of a new generation. Now, what does that mean legally? That there's something called an Av. Any idea?
Good question. Anybody?
What are you asking? In which context are we asking? What is a father? What I'm just a little.
Well, okay, you're a little lost, right? Are you a father yet?
I mean, I am a father, but I guess I must have missed the transition from the discussion
Yeah.
that we've been discussing on the other pasukim to this pasuk. Why are we discussing what fathers mean?
Okay, I'll tell you why. Because this first line in the Mishnah says that there are 4 fathers of Nezikin. Do you understand that? Hebrew means arba means 4, and avot means fathers in plural, and Nezikin means damages. So there's 4 fathers of damages. So what does a father mean in this context? What do you mean there's 4 fathers?
What does a father of damages mean in general?
Exactly. Or in specific, what does it mean? That's a good question, no? I mean, how are you a father of damage?
Well, I mean, we could talk about fathers of children, and we could talk about, whether you gave birth to them, whether you raised them, whether there's different aspects of what a father could be considered, certainly. But I'm just a little confused about what is a father of a damage.
Good. You should be confused. That's a good question. That's a strange language. It's a shinui lashon. It's strange language to use when talking about damages. You tell me there's 4 fathers there's 3 fathers of the Jewish people, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Okay, I understand what you mean. What do you mean? Yeah, there's 4 fathers of damage.
Yeah, maybe I naturally go to like that it would be maybe like 4. There are 4 categories of Nezikin is probably what I would have thought it might have said.
Okay. So now actually in Mishnaic talk, in Torah talk, when we talk about an Av, that's how we would translate it into English. It's a category. But what makes a category a category? You ever think of that? Probably not.
So I think David answered the question earlier when he said that there's progeneration from a father, meaning things come out from a father. So in this case, we're categorizing into 4 topics, which other types of damages could fall under, but they all come out from those primary 4 types of damages.
Excellent. So
So
do
4
you understand that,
originators.
Josh?
4 categories of originators of damages. Basically.
In other words, the Torah is going to tell us about 4 types of damage, but those damages are not going to be unique. They're going to be class groupings or categories of damages, even though they're unique, but they'll represent a class of damage. Okay? So that's what it means, avos nezik. And there's 4 mentions of the Torah of damage, but these damages are categorical. They're going to produce subcategories. Okay? And that's what the word, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like Shlomo picked up on a good point, is that the head is the progenitor. So it comes from that person. I would sort of maybe take it a step further, just thinking of like a head is like, Josh's children are they're going to have certain features that are different from another person's children. Like there is actually similarities between the head and the children that are different from other heads and their children.
Exactly. And we could talk about the father. Exactly. The children of one father are not like the children of the other fathers, correct?
Yeah.
Or else it would be his father. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So that's the first line. Arba avos nezik. Now, if we Okay, let's get the second line without my little additions. The first one is shore. What is a shore? Yes, shore. What is a shore? Anyone know what a shore is? Love it. You don't know what a shore is?
I want to let someone else answer.
Ah, okay. Josh, your Hebrew's not that good. You don't know what a shore is?
Oh, I know what a shorish is, a root.
Oh, that's shoresh. But what about a shore?
What is a shore? What is a shore? Do you know what a shore? My daughter here, she's standing right next to me. What is a shore, Shia? Shia.
Shai doesn't know. Okay, a shore is an ox.
Okay, an ox.
Tell
Oh.
him, Shai. Shore is an ox. Great.
Thank you. I didn't know that vocabulary word.
Oh, do you know what a boar is?
Boar is I think is a pit.
Okay, a boar is a pit. Okay. This third one is called maver, and that's a very difficult language to understand. But let's just say until we discuss it a little more deeper, let's say it means adam, a man who damages. A man damages another animal, for instance, okay? That would be man the damager. And the last one is called hever. Hever means to destroy. It's eish. Like we had bir chametz. We burnt up the chametz. So hever means to burn things by fire, okay? So now, why are these 4 types of damages, okay? Well, the Mishnah here is referring, according to Rashi, inside information, to this chart that we made, okay? And it's saying that what we see in this chart here as 4 distinct types of damagers are actually progenitors, I like that word, progenitors of a whole category, a whole subcategory of damages. So they don't exist in and of themselves, but things which are similar to them, they're going to be called toledo, will also have that law. So they're not unique cases, but they're categorical cases, even though they're spoken about in a unique case, okay? It's even though it talks about a shore doing damage, we're going to learn that there's a lot of ways the shore could do damage, which are not written in the Torah, which will also obligate you. But anyway, so here's the 4 in the Torah. Here's the shore, okay? Here's the boar, okay? And there's 2 shores, actually, okay? We have to talk about it, because one is shore hitting man and shore hitting the ox. So, and here is the other type of shore, Shane and Regal. We have to talk about that, and the age. Okay, so all these little categories here. Now, this is not the way that the Torah put out the information on a spreadsheet, right? If I tried to figure out how many ways of damages there are here, I don't know. I have the shore against the man. I have the boar against an animal. I have a shore against another animal. I have a ganav over here. What's that doing here? And then I have the shore trampling and eating again, and the aish. So I have a lot of different aspects of shore being mentioned here, and the Mishnah just says shore. But shore here can be shore killing a man, shore killing another shore. It could be shore trampling on property. It could be shore eating other people's property. So when the Mishnah says the first type of damage is a shore, that's a very interesting observation. Why does it say that generally there's the shore? Well, the shore has a lot of parts. Where do you see all the parts in the Mishnah? The Mishnah clumps all together, all these different shvarim into one category called shore. Okay, so we by contrasting, and this is a very important thing that we have to do, in order to understand what each part of the system does, you always have to contrast it with the other part of the system. If you want to know what's the difference between the Mishnah and the Torah, you have to look at the Torah and you have to look at the Mishnah and say, Manishtana. Remember, we all had Pesach? Manishtana Lailazem, Lailos. What's the difference? So what is the Mishnah doing different than what the Torah is doing? And if it's doing something different, well, why is it doing it different? Why can't I just read the Torah and get and understand all these things? What do I need the Mishnah for? You with me? So I always tell people that we have to learn to be observant Jews. I say that good science and good Torah learning starts with proper observation. If you have bad data, you're going to get bad conclusions. If you have good data, you're going to get good conclusions, hopefully. So you have to be an observant Jew. You have to observe how the Chumash laid out this series of damage to property and to man, and what is the Mishnah doing to the information that we already know in the Chumash. Now, it can't be repeating the same information, correct? Because then that violates the first rule we spoke about. There's no kafalinia. So it's got to be doing something different. So what is it doing different? Okay. So one thing that we notice here, without going too deep, is that it categorized all the different types of oxen into one category called shor. Even though we have shor killing man, shor killing animals, and we have shor goring animals and shor eating property, it categorizes all of that and it puts it together. Now, this idea of categorization is not a small point. It's not a small point. The Torah, as we mentioned in previous classes, is a document which has a lot of we call them hubs and nodes. There's a lot of interconnection between Pesukim. To understand how those internet connections work, you have to know how the system works. Okay, so one of the basic points of the Mishnah is to categorize. Anyone know what Shas means?
Shas? Isn't that
Yeah,
all the books of the Gemara? Complete set?
Why
Oh,
is it called?
it's an acronym. It's like Seder something, Hamishi Sidarim or something. I forgot.
Shas is an acronym of Shin, Shisha, Samak, Sidre. Shishay, Sidre, Mishnah. There's 6 orders of Mishnah. Okay, Shas is the first 2 words. Shisha, Sidre. And it's abbreviated to Shas. Now, sometimes it's right, though. Josh said it refers to the whole Gemara, but actually, it really refers to the Mishnah. And that's Shisha Sidre of Mishnah. Now, what does the Mishnah do that the Torah doesn't do? Okay, so the Mishnah adds what's called Seder. What does Seder mean? An organization to the Chumash. What do you mean? Hashem's not organized. No, Hashem's organization is very, very precise, but it's different than simple organization of material. Hashem can decide that he wants to talk about the laws of damage here. And in Vayikra, a few books later, he'll talk about the laws of damages over there. Now, why he does that is a very deep point, why he didn't put everything together in one unit. But what the Mishnah is going to do is going to categorize all the different laws into one unit and put it all together. So here, for instance, in Nezikin, even though we have these laws written over here in Shemos and other laws written in Vayikra, the Mishnah now will pull together all the different cases of damage put together into an organization, an organizational system. So what I like to say is when you look, if I asked you what is the organizational pattern of the Chumash. Okay, people look at me a little strange, but I mean, if you had a class, right, and you had to line up your students, so you could line them up according to age, you can line them up according to grades, you can line them up according to where they live. There's a lot of different ways you can line them up. Okay, so the what is the difference between how the Torah lines up its information as opposed to how the Mishnah lines up its information? So if you think about how the Torah lines up information, it's lining it up on a historic plane. It starts from the creation of the universe and the problems of the flood, and then Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and it goes into Shemos and getting out of Egypt and going into the Midbar, all the way up till we come into Eretz Yisrael. So the Seder is a time-oriented Seder. You're lining it up according from the creation of the world to coming to Eretz Yisrael. That's the Seder that it does. When we talked about the Mishnah is not interested in temporal or time Seder. It's interested in subject Seder. It wants to gather together all the subjects in one unit and then present them as a unit. Okay, so when we have the 6 orders of Mishnah, we have one unit that talks about holidays, Zaman. The next, the first one talks about agricultural laws, Zamanim, Zeroyim, I'm sorry. Then the second was Moed, all the holidays. Then the third section is women, all types of laws relating to women, marriage, divorce, etc. Then there's Nezikin, which we're in over here, damages. And then there's Kachim, the temple laws, and Taharos, purity, okay? So that is a categorical way of putting together the information in the Chumash, okay? Now, when we look over here in the Mishnah, we see that the Mishnah now takes what we find in the Chumash here, and there's one other place in the Chumash that talks about damages, which is Vayikra, where man damages directly an ox, and it categorizes it into 4 categories: the shore, the boar, the mob, and the head. Okay? Now, from the first chiddush of the Mishnah is that what we're going to see here as unique cases are really categorical cases. So from the shore here that gores, I could derive a toladah, a derivative, that if the shore kicks someone or kicks another animal and injures him, you'll also have to pay. That's called a toladah, even though the Torah didn't talk about kicking. But since it shares the same quality as the goring, even though it's a different part of the animal, so it'll have the same law. We'll have to get into that method. That's called an av and a tola. How do you produce toladot is a very, very interesting discussion, okay? But the point is that the first, it's actually the second message of the Mishnah, is that what we're going to learn about as unique cases in the Chumash are going to turn into categorical cases. That's the first big chiddush, new idea that we never understood before. If you read the Chumash, you'd say, well, it's talking about a specific case. If it's not written in the Chumash, then I don't have to pay. So if an animal gores another animal, I have to pay because it's written in the Chumash. But if he kicks another animal, I don't have to pay. So we're going to learn that's not true. We're going to learn a very important principle. There's something in the Chumash called an av and a tola, which means that there's a classic case mentioned in the Chumash that will be able to derive a lot of other subcategories from. Okay, now the next line in the first word we skipped over. The first word here was arba, right? That there's 4 of these avos, correct? Now, if you check this word arba and ask yourself the questions that Rabbi Yitzchak Kampenton asked, you should come up with a question about this word arba. Okay. Is it yet a lashon, kafalinian? Is there a chiddush in it? Is it shinui lashon? What do you think one should ask about the word arba?
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
No, I mean, I was just going to say that the number 4 seems like a specific number, but you kind of have to ask kind of why 4, and has this number 4 been used in other places, and does it really mean 4? Like we last week we were asking, the 4 cups and the 4 expressions of freedom and these kinds of things. And, and there's tremendous amount of literature out there that 4 might mean 5, And so I would ask, when we see 4, does it really mean 4? Why is it 4? Are there other sources where we can see when this exact same word has been used in other contexts, and what does it mean?
Okay. So first of all, very interesting. Okay. There's a lot of things to talk about, but 4, the first thing we have to do is look about this 4 in this context, okay? And the first rule that Rabbi Kampon stay, Tidaktik b'loshen heitev, you have to be medaktik in lashon, which means you're not supposed to find extra words or extra language. And if it says 4, it means 4 and not 5 and not 7. So the first way that we handle the text, it's very, very important, is it means what it says and it says what it means. If it says 4, it means it's only 4. It's not 3, it's not 5, it's not 7. Now, it could be in other contexts, we'll have to say that for some strange reason, the rule of preciseness was put aside. But that's going to be an exception to the rule, okay? 4 means 4 and not 5, okay? Now, still though, if we accept that 4 means 4, we should have a problem with this number 4. Not that the number 4, but the reason for saying 4. Why didn't the Mishnah just say Avos Nazikin, Hashor, V'Habor, V'Amava, V'Hever? And cut out this word 4.
Right, these are the categories of damages, and then they have the 4 listed following it. Why does it have to say there's 4 categories of damages and then list the 4? That's one of the.
You ask your little daughter. Everyone knows how to count to 4.
Right, you're teaching us. That seems to like it might be a superfluous word. So we have
Exactly. So this is a general rule that whenever there's a number, you see, it always comes to mamayet. It always comes to limit. Okay. Which means that other people may hold that there are actually more than 4. And there are people, by the way, who say that there are many more types of damages, okay? Rav Osher, Rav Chia. So this saying 4 means that we're limiting our discussion to only these 4, okay? It's a word of limitation, okay? If it didn't say 4, so I'd say, okay, no, maybe there's, like you said, maybe there's 5, maybe there's 6, maybe these examples of, okay. But by saying 4, it means that there's only 4. 4 is always a word of limitation, 4 and not anything else. Okay, so we looked at 4. We looked at avos. Here's a technical one. In Hebrew, do you know how to say a damager? In Hebrew, to say damage, you call it now mazik. It should have said arba avos mazik with a mem, not a nun. Nun is a sign of a passive case. Okay. So here it's called shinui lashon. There's a change in this language. Why don't you speak normally? Why did you change the mem to a nun? It doesn't belong here. Okay. So Laran talks about that subtle difference. Okay. But it's a difference that we have to see. All right. Now, let's go to the shore, the bore, the mava, and the heaven, right? There's 4 of them. Now, commenting on these, first of all, I mean, there's a lot of questions here. If I asked you, order is very important, right? I think you mentioned that, David, right? I mean, what is the order of these 4? Why is the shore before the bore, and the bore before the mava, and the mava before the heaven? Okay. So before I get into that question, we just have to know something, that there happens to be a very big difference of opinion between a great rabbi called Rav and Shmuel about what the shore is in this Mishnah and what the mava is in this Mishnah. Okay. So everyone knows what the bore is. There's no argument about that. That's the pit. Okay. And the heaven, we'll see, has to be fire. Okay, but these two, Shor and Mava, there's a difference of opinion between Rav and Shmuel. Rav says that the Shor is talking about all the parts of Shor. There's three parts of a Shor. There's when a Shor uses his Karen, his horns to gore, that's called Karen. When he uses his mouth to eat, that's called Shane, and eating someone else's produce. And when he uses his foot to trample on things, that's called Rego. So Rav says that the Shor in this Mishnah is a composite name for all the ways that a Shor does damage, whether it's Karen, whether it's Shane, or whether it's Rego. So again, even though in the Chumash, the Karen was mentioned first, and then later on at the end, it talked about the Shane and the Rego. Again, we see that the Mishnah is categorizing this into one unit called Shor. And Rav says that includes the three ways that a Shor does damage: the Karen, the Shane, and the Rego: goring, eating, and trampling. Now, when it comes to Mava, Rav says that's Adam who damages a Shor. Okay? That means a man takes a chas v'shalom, a knife, and he kills someone Shor. Okay? That's man against animal. All right? So that's the position of Rav. The Shor is all the ways that the ox does damage, and Mava is when man damages an ox. Okay, that's what Rav says. Shmuel disagrees with him, and he says no. The Mava here is talking about Shane, when the animal eats someone else's property, and the Shor is only talking about Rego. Okay, only talking about Rego. Why doesn't the Mishnah talk about Karen, according to Shmuel? So Shmuel says it's mentioned in the next Mishnah. Okay, there's a discussion in the Gemara about it. Okay, so now we have a little bit of a problem on how these words are being understood and being used. But that's the way we have to accept that. We have to accept that sometimes information becomes fragmented and there's a difference of opinion. We have to live with both sides. And the Gemara goes through a very extensive discussion of why Rav holds his position, why Shmuel holds his position, why doesn't Rav hold Shmuel, why does Shmuel hold Rav, and the pluses and minuses of both arguments are determined there, okay? But for our intents and purposes, we just have to know the setup. So here on a little chart, I just summarized here. This is Rav's opinion. The Shor is the Karen Shane Rego, the Boar is given, that's the pit. Adam damaging a Shor is the Mava, and Hever is Aish. Okay. Whereas Shmuel says no, the Shor here is only Rego, and the Shane, and the Mava is the Shane. And Adam is not subject of our Mishnah at all. Adam Amasek. It's only a man's property doing damage. It's not the subject of our Mishnah. Okay. So we can get into that more extensively, but we have to ask ourselves the question, why did the Mishnah present the information this way, as Shor, Bor, Mav, and Hever? Why? I ask you, what's the logical basis of setting it up this way? We start with a ox, then we move to a pit, and then we move to another type of ox or to Adam, the damager, and then finally we get to Aish. It doesn't seem there's a consistent, according to let's say Rav, start with man, the damager first, put him first. Don't put Shor first, start with man first. And according to Shmuel, why are you starting with Regel first? Regel was the last thing that we mentioned in the Chumash. So you're going from Regel, and then you're going to have a break of Regel with Bor, and then you're going to pick up again another type of the oxen. You're not putting all the Shvarim together. You broke the ox into two parts. So a question that we have to ask, and the commentaries do ask it, we're not going to get into it that deeply, but the commentaries do ask it, is what is the order of presentation here? What's the logical order? We don't presume that things are just thrown out haphazard. There must be a logical progression of ideas from the Shor, the Bor, to the Mava, and the Hever. But when you look at it simply, it doesn't seem to present itself as a clear way of presenting material. If you're going to talk about importance, so say man the damager should be first. Okay, if you're going to talk about Shmuel, so why does he break the shore into two parts? There's a lot of problems here in how the presentation of these four items are presented. Okay, but we'll just leave it at that. Now, the Mishnah now comments on these four types of damages. Okay, and what does it
Rabbi,
say?
I'm gonna interrupt and
Yes, please.
it would be great if we had nothing else to do and could just listen to you and participate all day and
Yeah, I agree.
6 days a week. But that's in the future. Baruch Hashem, we'll all be in it. We'll spend we'll spend all our time dissecting the machlokas between these guys. But
Fantastic.
I'm gonna have to jump off. I just didn't want to jump off in a rude manner. So thank you for the everything, and I'll catch up with you guys next week.
Fantastic. Nice having you. And Bezat Hashem, we'll see you next week. Okay. Okay. Well,
if
stop here. It's a good time.
there, maybe we'll just go like 5 more minutes, and then we'll cut it off. That way we get a solid session in.
Okay, very good. Okay. All right. So now what does the second thing in the Mishnah, what does the second statement of the Mishnah do here? Okay, David, we got you up on.
Lo hare ashor ke hare hamaves. So we say that, behold, the shore is not like, behold, the maves. So number one is not like number three.
Good. So what type of rules are being violated here?
There's a violation of a rule by saying this?
Well, I think so.
I guess maybe why are we saying something that's obvious? If they're different avos, then why do we need to be told that they're different?
That's an excellent question. No, you see that? You think that's nothing? That's a very good question. If obviously there's four avos, so they have to be different. Well, so why'd they have to tell me it's different? That's obvious, no? If they weren't different, then they wouldn't be written. So what's the chiddush of saying that the shore is not like the map? Good. That's one question. The next question, I have to get you guys learning. Once you understand the system, then you'll be asking me so many questions I won't be able to answer anything. That's good. But then we'll look into Rashi, Tosos, and we'll become smarter. Anything else you see that's a little strange here in this first presentation? What about order?
Right.
Yeah. What do you see strange in order here?
Well, I guess why does it jump from 1 to 3 and not compare 1 and 2? And also, why does it say shore first and not mave first? Why is it in that direction? And why does it not compare the shore to the bore?
Well, the shore first, that's not so bad because we started off with shore, bore, mav, and hever. So that's not so bad. But your other question is very well taken. You say lo hare shor ka hare bor, lo hare bor ka hare shor. Why did you skip from shore to mava?
And I would even go so far as saying that if we're saying that the shore and the mave are different, then I would assume that the shore and the bore are the same because we skipped it. We didn't say that they're different.
That's an inference. Okay, could be true, but but we got a problem here. We skipped the step.
Right.
And okay, good. All right. Now, the other thing we have to ask is a conceptual question. A little bit of what you're saying before, but I mean, why do I have to know that the shore is different than the mava? You said it's obvious it's different than the mava. Do I have to be told that? So that's a very deep question. And just to give you a hint that answer is, it's not if the Mishnah didn't clarify these differences, I could have a very serious question here that there's all these different nizikin are called kaful inyan. There's no reason to write 4 different types of mazik. Just give me one case of damage, and then that would be the classical case to learn all the other cases. You're telling me that these 4 are avos, right? That there's 4 avos. So I just have 1 av. Why do we need 4 avos? Anyone have 4 avos? No one has 4 avos. right? So the other question that the Mishnah is involved in is, why does the Torah have to talk about 4 different types of damages? Couldn't I just learn one from the other? Can one be a classical case to teach me that when my property does, or when I or my property damage other persons or objects, I have to pay? So that has to be a rule. What's the difference? What the object is. Okay. So that's the second question. The second question, that's really the basic question that the Mishnah is presenting. And it's trying to say that there are important differences between these 4 avos, such that if I had one, I would not necessarily infer that the other one would be obligated, would be chayav. I could say, sure, the only reason why that's chayav is because it has horns on its head. It's a dangerous and clear and present danger. So that you have to pay for. But just for an animal eating some property, so, he doesn't eat all the time. And it's not, he didn't really want to do any damage. He just happened to be hungry. So maybe I wouldn't have to pay. So the Mishnah is telling us that I actually have to tell you the Chumash is not doing kafalinyan here. If the Chumash would have written any one of these, I would have said there's a special reason why the Chumash went out of its way and picked that particular case, because that's the one that's chayav and everyone else would be patur. Okay, so that's the kafal inyan. Now that we have a language, you see, from Yitzhak Kampeton, we can talk very easily now. The Mishnah is bothered. Why does the Torah need 4 distinct cases? And the answer is going to be, because if I didn't have these 4 distinct cases, I only had one, I would not derive the other one. If I had the shore, I would have said that the mav is pater. Or if I had the mava, I would say that the shore is pater. Okay?
All right, this actually
Good.
might be a good stopping point.
No problem.